Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for our Careers Beyond the Bench and Industry webinar today. We're very excited that you were able to join. We had over 200 people register. Today we have 4 wonderful panelists who are excited to share their experiences and advice with you. I would suggest ask lots of questions. You can chat with the presenter and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. As a quick introduction about myself, I'm Jenna Hendershot. I work as a biochemist at Kamen Chemical in Ann Arbor, Michigan, but I volunteer my time with the ASB&B Education and Professional Development Committee, and through the EPD, I am the chair of the Graduate Student and Postdoc Subcommittee, and we're trying to develop career resources, and so this webinar series is part of that, and so we hope you enjoy it, and we have lots more webinars coming on later this year, and I hope you can join for those as well.
Thanks, Jenna. I am Erica Sabrasi. I'm the Education and Professional Development Manager for the American Society for Biochemistry and Molecular Biology, and I will be your moderator today. So as Jenna pointed out, throughout the webinar, you're welcome to ask questions of the panelists through the chat box, which should be on the lower left-hand side of your screen. Because of the number of people on the webinar today, we won't be able to allow you to speak, but you can write in your questions using the chat box. I apologize, all of our panelists tried to join via webcam, but we're having some technical issues again. If you joined us on previous webinars, this is a similar issue to what we've had, and we thought we had corrected it, but apparently we have not. So I apologize if you can't see any of the panelists or you can only see some of the panelists, but you will be able to hear everyone. And I would suggest that to all of our panelists, if you're sitting far away from your phone and you're on speakerphone, if you could move closer to it. We have a few participants who said that it's a bit quiet for them. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started with, I'm going to introduce each of our panelists one by one and then give them about 3 to 4 minutes to share with you the highlights of their career path and their current job. So we're going to start with Megan Lau, who is a Senior Technical Support Scientist at Abbott.
Okay, so hi everyone, my name is Meg, and I am a Senior Scientist at Abbott Diagnostics, which is in Chicago, Illinois. So I graduated from Washington University in St. Louis in 2013 with a PhD in microbial pathogenesis. After I graduated, I started really putting out feelers to find the next position. And I knew when I was in graduate school that I did not necessarily want to do a postdoc, that I did not want to work in academics. So I was lucky enough that I did have some flexibility with my graduate school lab, and that I stayed on as a postdoc while I job searched. I am from the Chicagoland area originally, and so I knew that I wanted to move back to Chicago. And so I was really focused on companies that were in the Chicagoland area. So I applied to Abbott in 2013. The interview process was pretty slow, which I think is quite common for larger companies like Abbott. And so I finally started in 2014 in the diagnostics division. So I was brought on specifically to work on a project where we were updating manufacturing processes. So the majority of our assays are amino assays, and the microparticle component contains usually an antibody coupled to a solid phase. We had a lot of products on market that were using kind of an outdated manufacturing process, and so our group was tasked with going through kind of assay by assay and updating those manufacturing processes. In addition to that project, we worked on a handful of other things that are related to on-market support. So we have improvement projects. If a product is not working exactly the way it's supposed to in the field, sometimes we'll go in and we'll figure out, why isn't it working? How can we fix it? We'll also do cost savings projects. If we, have a component that we could potentially source from another vendor at a discounted price, sometimes we'll go in and make those swaps in order to save money. Every once in a while, we'll work on projects that are not funded through R&D, so we have a lot of flexibility in that way. Sometimes we'll evaluate new biologics, new antibodies, new antigens, and then we'll also support changes that need to be made to formulations or inactive ingredients because of sometimes suppliers will make changes or we'll need to make a change internally. And so the majority, I think, of my time is spent supporting kind of our products that are already on market.
Great, thank you, Meg. Our next panelist is Maxim. He is a Senior Alliance Manager at Guardant Health. And Maxim, did I say your last name right?
Yeah, that's right.
Great.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maxime. I am currently, as Erica mentioned, Senior Manager of Pharmaceutical Alliances. And I just started this week, so actually kind of a new transition. But my background started really in undergrad when I studied economics and biology. And so I went into grad school also at Washington University with the understanding that I wouldn't go down the academic route. So I knew I wanted to be more on the industry and the business side. So at Washington University, I completed a PhD, finished in 2014 in molecular genetics and genomics. And during my PhD, I spent a lot of time in tech development, thinking about translating research and tools into commercial entities. During my time at WashU, I was really fortunate to be part of a student consulting group, an independent autonomous organization that allowed me to work with startups in the St. Louis area, consulting for them. So I gained a lot of experience in grad school working with startup companies, thinking about all of the list of things that have to be completed in order to successfully commercialize any sort of idea. And so I think I was kind of fortunate in knowing that I didn't want to go and further in research doing a postdoc. And I think that's an important kind of decision to come to terms with in anybody thinking about the next steps in their career. Sometimes it's very important to open doors, but it's just as important to understand which doors you want to close. For me, that door was becoming a physician. I never thought I would make a good physician or wanted to go to medical school, and that was actually really helpful in those early days. My first job out of undergrad was, again, on the business side, sort of as a product development individual project manager for a small company that I actually had consulted with in undergrad in the genetic space, in the bioinformatics space, and that was my real exposure, my first real exposure outside of the lab and working in a multidisciplinary team. After that, at the startup, I realized that it's super important to understand what customers want, whether those are scientists, physicians, or anybody in between, and that was something I really lacked at the startup. And so I purposely went to a large reference laboratory, bioreference laboratories. So think about Quest and LabCorp, you may be familiar with. It's a similar type of company. And there I specifically took a role that was in business development. I was a business development associate, and my role there was to serve as a liaison and the glue between a lot of different people, speaking to pathologists and oncologists about the testing that we do, helping to think strategically about the next types of tests that we should be investing in, so attending conferences, staying up to date with literature. But that was really a shift from being buried behind the bench to really being in front of customers and understanding what clients want. And I really enjoyed that because I not only got to work with oncologists and pathologists and the customers at the end of the day, but I also got to work with our technical teams and our sales teams and our marketing teams. So I really enjoyed that multidisciplinary approach. My role now is entirely focused on pharmaceutical companies. I work for Guardant Health that does cell-free DNA testing, and so I'm helping pharmaceutical companies introduce cell-free DNA testing into their clinical trials. I would say one of the biggest challenges I had leaving grad school was convincing people that I was not just a scientist, but also someone with business experience. I think everyone that starts out in the PhD postdoc track that wants to shift gears towards something that's non-science or research related, I think faces that hurdle of convincing someone to give you a shot at the business side, whether that's product management, project management, marketing, more sales or liaison communication, or IP. So I think that was the biggest hurdle I had, and I could certainly speak more to that if people are interested. But that's sort of a bit about me.
Thanks, Maxim. Next up, we have Louis Roulat, who is a patent agent and scientific liaison at Johnson & Johnson.
Hi, everyone. So as they said, my name is Louis Roulat, and my story, I think, is pretty similar to most people that have contemplated leaving the bench. I got a undergraduate degree for a dual major in biology and chemistry. After that, I got a PhD in biochemistry, and then after I got my PhD in biochemistry and I had experienced the bench for some time, I knew at that point that I was about to get my PhD, that bench work was not going to be the rest of my life. So I immediately, at the point where I was defending or writing my thesis, I was starting to think what my next steps were going to be in order to not become a bench scientist forever. So I applied to law school because I had heard a lot about intellectual property and its relationship with scientists, and I didn't want to totally lose my scientific knowledge, and I wanted to, continue using it for the rest of my career, just not necessarily practice it at the bench. So I applied to law school, and I did get accepted to law school, but then after contemplating the expense that I was going to incur by going to law school, I decided that I didn't want to get myself into hundreds of thousands of dollars of loans. So after careful thought, I decided I was going to do a postdoc and then figure out what I was going to do after that. So I did complete a postdoc for 4 years. After that, I got a position at the University of Pennsylvania as a research assistant professor. So I was thinking, well, at that time, I was thinking, well, perhaps I can become an academic professor, and I won't necessarily be behind the bench. I'll just be managing a lab and in academia. So that was what I was thinking at the time. But during that time that I was contemplating all of that, the scientific funding was at an all-time low at the time. The recession was also a factor. So I had seen a lot of my colleagues, a lot of my postdocs friends that had to leave the lab because of lack of funding. A lot of grants weren't funded. So that really made me think again, well, perhaps academic route is no longer an option for me, because I work at the University of Pennsylvania with a lot of Nobel laureates and very, very accomplished people, and I'm going to be competing for funding with them. So I didn't think I was going to be very successful in doing so. So I started browsing jobs and databases, and I saw a position for Johnson & Johnson for what they call a patent liaison. So basically what I do is I'm a bridge between the law department, the intellectual property department here in the pharmaceutical sector of the company, and the scientists. And I thought this was a perfect position for me because the interest I had in law before that was going to be nourished without me having to put out loans. And also, I was going to continue using my science. So I was like, this is the perfect position for me. So I applied. I was lucky enough to get an interview, and I have been with the company for 5 years. But make no mistake, it took a lot of applications out there. I must have applied, at the time, I must have applied to like 60 different companies and positions, and I only got 3 interviews, and this was one of them. So it wasn't easy. It took a lot of work, but thankfully I think I'm in a position that I am enjoying, and I still consider myself a scientist. So that's pretty much my story.
Thank you, Louis. And our 4th panelist is Stephanie Villarreal. She is the Associate Director for Global Project and Alliance Management at Merck.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Stephanie Villarreal, and I'm a project manager in the Global Project and Alliance Management Group at Merck. And I actually graduated from Emory University with a BS in physics. I then went on to start a PhD program at the University of Pennsylvania in bioengineering, but after 3 years there, I actually decided to leave that program with a master's degree to start to pursue my career in industry. And I came straight to Merck. So that was in 2004. I started out as a research scientist in the drug discovery space, and I actually worked in drug discovery for almost 11 years. And so during that time, I mainly supported a neuroscience program. I developed an expertise in histology, so we were looking at protein or mRNA distribution in tissue samples that would come from animal studies that were designed to assess various drug candidates in the discovery space. And so over the course of about 6 years, I was promoted to a senior scientist and then to an associate principal scientist. And in that role, I ended up moving into a role where instead of just sort of handling the histology endpoints of a study, I was handling larger studies where they needed to be coordinated across multiple functional areas. So you'd have like a neuroscience biology group, in vivo pharmacology, potentially the imaging group, in vitro pharmacology. They all needed to be coordinated to handle these larger studies. And then I also often worked with external CROs to handle some of the sample analysis. So in that role, I was spending about, I would say, half my time in the lab and half out of the lab. And I had the opportunity to work on a study where we were assessing a drug candidate that was actually already in clinical development. And it was really my first look into what happened beyond the drug discovery phase and in the drug development phase. So it got me really interested in drug development. And I thought that I might be able to apply sort of my coordination and study management skills to a project management position. So I started to look, it was in late 2014, I started to look at the project management organization. And it was a difficult move to get over to project management. It took upwards of about a year where I met with several people in the project management organization, tried to understand what qualities they were looking for. I did a lot of training in my spare time for the types of things that they said they thought might be needed. And eventually, in early 2015, I was able to move into a project manager role. But initially, I took a step back in level. So I moved back to a senior specialist position. And then after about a year in the role, I was promoted to associate director. So in the role that I'm in now, I support both neuroscience and vaccine drug development projects. And so at Merck, when a drug candidate moves from the discovery area to the development area, a cross-functional team is put together to create and execute a plan for that drug to enter the clinic and then hopefully progress through various phases of human testing to become an approved and marketed product. So a typical development team would be made up of representatives from areas such as discovery, clinical, regulatory, statistics, drug formulation, drug safety, and a project manager is assigned to each development team to lead the team in partnership with the discovery and the clinical leaders through the creation of the drug development plan and the execution of that plan. So we do that through timeline and deliverable management, through risk management planning, through working with finance on budget and resource management, and by sort of generally facilitating the interaction between the various functional areas so that we can assure communication and manage any conflict resolution. So this role has been a fantastic way for me to apply sort of my science background to be able to understand the drug candidates that are coming forward, but to now be able to work in a way where I get to see a little bit of all of the different areas that go into drug development.
Thanks, Stephanie. So I'm going to get us kicked off in the Q&A portion. We have the next 40 minutes or so. We'll take questions from the audience in the chat box, and then I will fill in with some questions as needed. So I'll get us kicked off. So panelists, can you speak to what skills both soft and hard skills. What skills are important in your career, and what skills would a hiring manager be looking for either your position or the entry-level position in your career path? Excuse me. And anyone can start.
Yeah, I can go ahead and kick us off here. This is Maxime again. I think for junior level positions, there isn't necessarily always the assumption that the applicant will have an innate or extensive knowledge of the space and the industry. But depending on the description of the jobs and the industry itself, sort of a basic knowledge of the science behind it is certainly important. In our field and industry, there's really important considerations between basic research and clinical research, and there is quite a big divide, and especially speaking for myself, coming more from a basic research background, between pure research in the lab that we think of and more clinical research. And so, if you're applying for more in pharmaceutical industries or diagnostic industries, having some background in clinical testing and just the biology behind and the science behind medicine and this particular field is definitely important. So that speaks more to some of the harder skills of knowledge that is sort of expected. As far as the soft skills, the world is increasingly becoming integrated amongst many different people. Communication is constantly evolving, and so I really look for people that have some experience working in interdisciplinary teams, potentially leading those teams and understanding what it takes and what it means to take a lot of different ideas and a lot of different people and motivate them towards one goal and coordinate amongst themselves in one goal. Those are really hard skills, soft skills that experience really teaches. So that's sort of my 2 cents on that.
Thanks. Stephanie, Meg, Lewis, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I can just add that in my area, it's very similar to what Maxime just said. We have sort of 3 main areas that are looked for in new candidates, and so because I'm a project manager, some project management experience is one of them, but that can be pretty vaguely defined. If you've managed a timeline or had to, meet certain deliverables by a certain time and manage that for more than just yourself. Drug development experience, as Maxime said, can be so important, and it's not as easy to get, but having some understanding of what it looks like as a drug moves through the clinic and what the different phases of drug development are, that can be really helpful. And the third one that is really the most important thing that's looked for here is leadership. So any experience that you've had, and it doesn't even always have to be within your job, where you can show leadership, is hugely important for this position.
Anybody want to add anything else before we move on? Okay. Can you guys speak to what a grad student or a postdoc could do to prepare for these career paths well before they're ready to apply? What skills we talked a little bit about the skills that they could gain, but could you provide some tangible experiences, ways that they can gain that experience while as a grad student or a postdoc?
Well, so this is Lewis, and for the patent liaison role that I have here, other places will call it patent agent. If you do like a search on databases, you can search patent agent. So the one skill that you can do on your own without ever having to set foot in a legal department is studying for the U.S. Patent Office's patent agent examination. So basically the short name for that is called patent bar. That's basically an exam that if you do pass, you're certified to file and prosecute patent applications before the U.S. Patent Office. So in other words, currently, if you don't have the certification, what you can only do at this point is file a patent application for inventions that you created yourself. And even that would be foolish for a person to do on their own, because patent law is so extremely complicated and changes every day as new cases go in court and new case laws come out of the judicial system. So, we never recommend an inventor to file their own applications, because they could miss out on a tremendous amount of opportunity in their patent application. So, but you can do it. However, you can't, without the certification, you can't file a patent application for anyone else. You can only do so for yourself. So if your brother, sister, whoever has an invention, and you want to file an application and help them with it, you can't do so without the certification. So passing that examination is you can self-study for it. There are courses out there that you can pay for that will actually teach you tricks on how to pass. It's very similar, to taking the GRE or taking the LSATs or whatever. So it's a standardized exam. It's a full day. You go in, you take the test. You know immediately whether you passed or failed. It's multiple choice. There's no essays. It is a very, very difficult exam, so you do definitely have to put in time to study and know the material very well. But you don't need any patent background, because the materials for you to study will definitely provide all the background that you need. So again, this is for my role or for a patent agent role, and if you do pass that, you are able to work in any law firm as a patent agent or in a pharmaceutical company that may need your services.
Thanks, Louis. A really great explanation. Anybody else like to add anything for their career path?
Yeah, so I would just say that I think, more and more people are realizing that not everyone wants to work in academics, and there are probably more programs now than there have been in the past to try and give graduate students and postdocs experience to topics in industry before they try and make the transition to industry. And so right after I defended, I was lucky enough to take part in this 2-week boot camp at the Keck Graduate Institute. And it was kind of like a crash course in, getting an MBA. And so we talked about topics that were relevant to industry, like commercialization, intellectual property. They had an accounting class. And then in the afternoon, they did a professional development, a bunch of professional development seminars. And then we also had to work on a team project together. And so that was really valuable, a really valuable experience, but also, when I interviewed, I definitely brought that up. So I think, just to seek out opportunities like that will indicate to people that you want to work in industry, that you're making an effort to learn more about industry before you even start applying.
Yeah, I want to echo Meg's comments there. Fortunately, universities are getting more and more focused on providing alternative opportunities for graduate students and postdocs. And similarly, as I mentioned, I was fortunate enough to be part of a student group that worked with startup companies in small 6 to 8 week consulting projects. And just so through that, I really gained a ton of experience that helped me stand out and to help me speak to some of the problems that the industry was facing. And if these types of programs don't exist at your university, that's where networking and going to entrepreneur events and just offering your services, your consulting services to others could actually pan out. Many startups are looking for help for various projects. Alternatively, if you have a TTO or OTM at your university, I would highly recommend approaching them and seeing if there are programs that you can apply for and or start supporting them in some of the work that they do. If anyone is excited about being approached by enthusiastic scientists that are willing to pull some weight, I would love every day if someone came and asked if I could use their help, because there's always a lot to do. So I would highly encourage everyone to take advantage of these departments and these opportunities, or to go and seek them out yourselves.
So I can just add specifically for the project management field, if you have an interest in that. So there's an organization called PMI, the Project Management Institute. You can go online and look at their website and become a member. And similar to what Louis was talking about in terms of a standardized exam, they have something similar for project managers. It's called the PMP, the Project Management Professional. And that's a certificate that you can earn after studying and taking an exam that's offered by the PMI. So that is something that you could start to do some self-studying on your own. In order to take the exam, you do have to fill out an application that involves showing that you have had a certain amount of project manager experience. So that can, again, sort of be loosely defined depending on what type of work you've done and if it could be considered managing a project. But that is something that you could look into. And I would say that that certificate is now becoming much more widely used for jobs outside of project management. So, for example, at Merck, we have people who are regulatory submissions managers. So they work in the regulatory department, but they have to manage all of the regulatory submissions that are done. And just in the last year, it was instituted here that all regulatory submissions managers needed to get their PMP certification. So it's not, it's something worth looking at, not only if you're interested in project management.
Great. So I'm going to move to a question from the audience. So one of our participants asks, considering that about 70% of U.S. postdocs are international, are any of the panelists from an international background? Were any of you on a visa at some point during your career?
I was not.
No.
Okay. Then I think the second question is still valid. So she asks, competing with U.S. citizen and permanent residents, what's your advice for international grad students and postdocs to overcome the obstacle of visa sponsorship and employment barriers they face if they are interested in moving into careers outside of academia? Can any of you speak to that? Have you been involved in any hiring or advising?
So I currently also lead the Hispanic Organization for Leadership and Achievement here at the company. Right now things are a little tougher in terms of the hiring process for people who are not currently either citizens or have residency. So that there is a barrier for that, but we definitely, when we go out there and we do career workshops, we always encourage people to apply to the position of interest anyway, because companies are more interested in the qualifications more so than what your immigration status or citizenship status is. If you are a candidate who fits the profile perfectly, I can't speak for academia, but companies, they will work with you if you fit all the qualifications that fit, whatever it is that the position out there is advertising for. But the key is that, you have to really look into the qualifications section of the job application and make sure that you fit every aspect that's being asked for there. It's not such a great idea to go and look for a job, and if they say, we want someone with 7 years experience and you only have one, apply. I think a combination of being smart about what you're applying for, make sure that it fits like a glove, that the position fits like a glove. Make sure that you apply for it and take risks. If you don't take a risk, then you'll never know whether they'll ever do anything about hiring you or not. And if they think that you're worthwhile, that you really are the perfect candidate for the position, they will work with you.
Yeah, so I think that, diversity is extremely important for, many companies. And though I don't have direct experience with that, I would say that, maybe to focus on the soft skills. I mean, people will fight to get someone hired that they want to work with. So, being easy to get along with and receptive to people's ideas and having good communication skills where people are, understand what you're trying to say. And I think the soft skills sometimes really make or break, an applicant.
Great. All right, this is another question from the audience. I'm going to rephrase it just slightly because it fits with there are a few questions that are along this line. So our participants are asking if there are special skills during your PhD time or during a postdoc that will really set apart your application from others. So they're asking if getting a PhD or doing a postdoc is particularly helpful to these career paths or if they're unnecessary.
So I can.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, I can start. So in my particular area, I would say that there are people within this department that have PhDs, and there are people within this department that don't have PhDs, and their level within the department is not defined by whether or not they have a PhD. So I think that, in many cases, I think at Merck, those people potentially started in the discovery space, and so they used their PhD to get into the company and get some discovery experience, and then moved over into the project management area. So whether or not they had a PhD wasn't necessarily a consideration, specifically for the project management position. That's not to say that it hurts. It certainly doesn't hurt.
Sure, thanks. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think I'll speak from my perspective, and I want to echo what Stephanie said, and that is that not all jobs require a PhD, and I know many people that don't have PhDs and are exceptional, and I also know many people that have PhDs and are not exceptional. So it's challenging because I don't judge anyone on whether they have a PhD or not, just whether they have the requirements. And so that certainly should be kept in mind. So some positions require a PhD, so whether you're eligible for those or not. What was beneficial about a PhD for me, being customer facing, is that at least at BioReference in my company, there wasn't anybody that was customer facing that had a PhD and had extensive technical background. And so having a PhD did automatically give me credibility and open up different conversations that others wouldn't necessarily have been able to have with customers and clients. But typically, in industry, there are scientific or medical liaisons that are specifically created to play that role. So for me, I really enjoyed being able to have other conversations at a level and in a level of detail that others on my team may not have been able to have.
I can speak for my position. My position, as it is posted, or as it was posted at the time, said that you needed a minimum of a master's degree, but they preferred PhD. I think that's what, if I remember correctly, that's how the position was stated. I will say that most of the my position has been open since I started here. There have been openings, I think, like twice or 3 times. I can't exactly remember the number of times, because they either expanded the department or some people retired. But when human resources forwards the resumes to us to review, everyone who has been forwarded to, because basically it goes a first round of screening by human resources, and then human resources sends us like a whittled down list of people who they think might be good for the role. In order for I guess to pass, most of the resumes had PhDs, so you can take that with a grain of salt. That's just the way it worked with human resources. I guess because of the language that says that, PhD preferred, even though it was a minimum of a master's. Most of the resumes that landed on our desk for review had all the candidates had PhDs. So, that you can take that as you will.
Great. Thanks, everyone. So Meg, can you restate the name of the business training program you did at Keck? One of our participants would like to write that down.
I'm not sure if, it was a few years ago, so I don't know if the name is the same, but I think it's at the Keck Graduate Institute, which is out in California. And at the time, I think it was like a bioscience management boot camp, something like that.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I've seen some advertisements for them. I think they're definitely still offering something similar, if not the exact same thing. Thanks. Okay, so we had another participant ask, and we sort of got at this question already, but I'll ask it again. Are there any online certificate courses or internship programs that can help get along these career paths other than an academic postdoc? And so some of the things that were already mentioned, of course, was the Keck Graduate Institute Bioscience Management Bootcamp. Stephanie recommended the PMP program and certificate. And then Lewis spoke about passing the patent bar to become a patent agent. I think those are the three that we've talked about so far. Are there any other certificate courses or internship programs that you guys would recommend?
I know a lot of the larger pharmaceutical companies have leadership training programs or management training programs. I'm not sure if Stephanie could speak to that, but I had taken some interest in that, since it gives you you spend essentially 2 years or so in different departments, getting to see the ins and outs of the industry and the company itself, poising you to step up in some sort of leadership position. I think those are really interesting programs because they look for people fresh out of the PhD or the postdoc, and realize that there's a lot of training to be had.
Yeah, so we do have a program like that here, although I believe that you have to have been a Merck employee for 1 year prior to applying to that program. So they are looking for people that are sort of newly hired, but you're not hired directly into that program. We do also do postdoc sort of rotations, I guess, here, and I think they can be offered for different lengths of time. They're generally in the discovery area, but just getting that experience in the pharmaceutical industry would give you, a huge leg up if you were looking for a career down the line. So if you go to, Merck.com/careers, there's an area there for internships and postdocs, and we post those positions. So you could certainly take a look and see what's currently available.
Now, in addition, I think to the certifications, real-world experience is also very valuable. And so, if you can tout experience in project management, or if you can work with your Office of Technology Management, that will be extremely valuable, whether or not you are currently certified to be a project manager or to be a patent agent. So I would just maybe take a two-pronged approach to the certification kind of path.
Lewis, this question is specifically for you. Do you recommend any specific study materials for the patent bar?
Yeah, so there's what you call the P as in Paul, PLI Institute, the Practicing Law Institute. It's not cheap. They offer a crash course that is, I think, about $2,500 or $2,500. But if you have a .edu address in your email, then you get a $1,000 discount. So they offer what is arguably one of the best courses in the area, you can either buy the home course, so it's an online pre-recorded course where they basically teach you everything, and they have practice exams, and they go through the material very carefully with you, or you can go live into one of their, I guess, 5 or 6 institutes, like New York, Chicago, San Francisco, or wherever, and then you can have physical contact with the professors, with the law professors who are actually practicing lawyers, who teach the course, and then you can stay after class and ask them questions or whatever. So it really depends on what your best learning style is, but that's an example, and there's a whole host of competing courses out there as well that you can look into that are perhaps a bit less pricey. But yeah, there's a whole host of resources out there for study materials for the course. But my recommendation is if you're invested, do the PLI course. It's not cheap, but it's going to be well worth it because this is a certification that stays with you for life.
Thank you. Another question from a participant. What are the best places to look for jobs in your career path? And I think specifically the participant is asking like on individual company websites, on things like Indeed or LinkedIn. Can you offer some advice in that area?
So for the position that I applied to at Abbott, I applied through the Abbott job board. That really is the exception to the rule. I would say, people applying through the job board, the vast majority of colleagues that have started, around the same time that I started or after, knew someone that worked at Abbott. But if you are going to take the approach of applying directly to the companies, I think the company website is probably the best way to go.
Yeah, and I think that's also evolving. More and more people themselves are advertising roles on LinkedIn. So strengthen your LinkedIn network as much as possible, and that's a terrific benefit because there you're getting directly at someone in the company and interacting with them instead of just sending your CV into a black box. I avoided the submissions to black boxes of companies. I didn't think that was a viable strategy for me, and I depended much more on personal introductions and doing networking and meeting people. But LinkedIn, I think today is becoming really valuable. The company websites helps you get informed of what's available. And actually, one thing that I did that I think is actually quite effective, when you see jobs advertised and you understand how they fit with the organization, try to go onto LinkedIn and figure out who might be that hiring person. So if you're looking at a product manager position, find the person that's a vice president or director of product management on LinkedIn and try to connect with them directly. That way you're already getting in front of them, albeit indirectly, but you know how to target your efforts. Because there's typically a hierarchy in how organizations are structured, and that's led by the title of the job position and of the individual. I wonder if anyone else has tried that strategy.
I have advised other people to use that strategy.
Yeah. Mine was pretty generic. I just went into Indeed, and I just put, I forgot what my search term was at the time because I wasn't sure what I was looking for. I think I put something like scientific consulting or scientific advising or something along those lines, and then I guess the keyword for my current position was somewhere in there, so it came up. I didn't know anybody in the company. I didn't have any networking contacts, so I just filled out an application, sent a resume, crafted a cover letter, and hoped for the best. And I was lucky enough to get called. So, I guess the moral of my story is, like, even if you don't know anybody, and there's a position that you're interested in and that you qualify for, you should definitely still apply.
All right, so for the participants on, I'm going to leave the chat box open for about 2 more minutes. So if you have any questions, get those in now. We have about 10 minutes left on the webinar, so I'll give you about 2 more minutes to get your questions in. This is another question from a participant. So she asks, every job posting seems to require prior experience. Can you offer any advice on finding the elusive entry-level positions?
I think someone mentioned it earlier, but sometimes you have to ignore what the experience requirements are. I think everyone wants to hire someone that has more experience or has the most experience out of all the candidates. But I will never hire someone that has too much experience. I want to hire people that are under the level of threshold of experience that I expect, because I want people to learn and be excited about learning. And I took that same approach about finding a job. I don't want to apply for a job that I'm perfectly suited for, because I won't learn and I won't be challenged. And so similarly, I would encourage people to not be too discouraged by those kinds of requirements. Granted, if they're looking for 5 to 6 years of experience and you don't have any, I think that might make you ineligible. But 1, 2, 3 years of experience, I wouldn't let that prevent you from applying. At least that's my perspective.
And I think that in your resume and your cover letter, you can highlight the experience that you do have, whether it be your technical background or your experience working on teams or, delivering presentations. There is a lot of value in the experience that you already do have, and so you just need to figure out a way to, present it in the best light.
Yeah, I think I have to follow up on what she just said. I fully agree. Make sure you maximize your experience in a way that it's presented, I guess, in a smart way. So, for example, if they say 5 or 6 years of lab experience, make sure you count the lab experience in your PhD work. Make sure you maximize every bit, you juice out every piece of I guess, experience that you've acquired up to the point of applying. If you worked in some sort of consulting team while you were doing a PhD, then make sure that's accounted for. So make sure that you think, oh, that was when I was doing a PhD. That's educational. No, I think you should still make sure that you maximize every opportunity, every exposure you had in your education or any other job that you had, in order to make sure that you fit the criteria as best you can.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I would also say, for Merck specifically, and I'm not sure how it works with other pharmaceutical companies, but when you go to apply on the website, so all applications have to come in, through the Merck careers page, regardless of whether or not you know someone and have handed them your application. You still have to go through the formal process to actually apply. And for most positions on the Merck website, I can give you a little tip that often there will be a series of questions that come up that you have to respond yes or no to. And those questions are based off of the description of the job that's been created by the people in the area that have made the posting. And someone previously had mentioned that those responses initially go through human resources, and the way that it works at Merck is that if you respond no to any one of those responses, you're immediately cut. So you need to think a little bit about creative ways to be able to respond yes, right? Because sometimes those questions are phrased in a way that seems like, oh, well, I think I have to say no to that. But you really need to think about, is there a way that you can say yes to that and then justify that yes through your cover letter or once you're, actually asked to come and interview? Because if there is, then, you should do everything you can to respond yes to all of those questions, or you'll be cut before people even get a chance to look at your resume.
Quick question. Do any of your jobs involve writing, specifically writing like you would do for a manuscript, a grant, or a thesis? So very technical writing. Do any of you do writing of that sort?
Yes, definitely. That is a key component of my job. I write and file patent applications. I would say that involves about 50% of my work. And the patent applications are basically you write all the scientific data of an invention that the company came up with, and you work hand in hand, at least for my job, with the scientists to make sure that every piece of data that they've acquired is incorporated in the patent application. So there's a lot of heavy technical writing in my job. Before I was hired, my hiring manager asked me to submit. After he interviewed me, he said, "Can you submit a writing sample?" So I remember I wrote, back in my postdoc days, I wrote a proposal, NIH proposal for research that I had submitted for funding. I sent that to him, and he took a look at it, and I guess he liked it because I'm here. So yeah, there is definitely, at least in my job, there's a ton of writing. So that's a skill that is definitely important in the patent field.
All right, the last question I have, actually second to last question. Do recruiters and hiring managers prefer to hire candidates that they know through someone, so they either know personally or they know someone who knows that person?
I do think that's how a fair amount of people get an interview. How you conduct yourself in an interview is really will make or break your chance of getting hired. And so I don't think that necessarily, someone who knows someone is favored for the hire. I would say people are more or less on the same ground when they come in for an interview.
Okay, great. Then I have one last question, and we'll close it out. Actually, none of the participants asked about this, but I think it's an important question. So could you guys briefly share your thoughts on work-life balance in your jobs?
Yeah, I'll jump right in. I actually just recently made the transition to a more local company because of work, life balances. My previous job required a lot of travel, and I was on the West Coast. My company was on the East Coast. There was a lot of 6, 7, 8 a.m. conference calls. So I came from a job that required a lot of travel, a lot of flexibility, but I loved it. I really enjoyed it, and now I'm in a position where it's more local. People, I think, have a great sense of work-life balance, 9 to 5, 8 to 6 type of windows. But there's a lot of excitement in what we're doing, and so people want to show up for work and really want to make a difference. And so when that's the culture and that's the attitude, it's just a really fun place to be.
Thanks. Anybody else like to add anything briefly to that?
In my particular area, I think work-life balance is very highly valued. They make a lot of efforts in our department to ensure that people are striking an appropriate balance. That's not to say that we don't work very hard and work long hours at times, but there is an understanding that, particularly in this job, your work can kind of ebb and flow. So you can have times where you have a lot going on and you need to be here extra hours, and then there's an understanding that in times when things back off a little bit, that you can take a little bit more time at home. In addition to that, we now are able to work from home 2 days out of the week. So that's sort of the general policy within my specific department. So that allows a lot of help. I live almost an hour away from work, so that's a huge help for my work-life balance.
All right, so I think we're at 2 o'clock, so I want to thank our panelists emphatically for taking part in this and for giving us an hour of your time. A few of our participants have asked if they can connect with you on LinkedIn. It is by no means required. If you're okay with the participants connecting on LinkedIn, can you let them know that right now?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm also very open to connecting on LinkedIn.
Me as well.
Okay, all 4 of them said yes, and their information is up on the website. It's also up on your screens right now. All right, so again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to all of our participants who have attended the webinar today. I would like to remind everyone that the ASBMB offers a number of career resources. We have this webinar series, and we'll have 1 webinar a month for the rest of the year. We have a series of regional career workshops, and you can find information about those on our career website as well. We also offer a variety of online tutorials, courses, and skills training, much of which is offered free. And then I'd like to just close it out by letting you know that as soon as I close the webinar out, you'll be taken to the post-webinar survey. It really helps us if you can complete that survey. It lets us know how well we did on this webinar and helps us improve future webinars. And if you are not currently a member of the ASBMB, you'll receive a discount for membership at the end, $10 off new graduate membership and $20 off new associate or postdoc membership. So again, thank you to all of our panelists and our participants. We appreciate you joining us for this webinar today.